Hi everyone, part 2, or part 1 in the book, Disobedience, which hopefully none of you have been showing at home. We've got the woods with some wolves and a bird running through. A trap to catch a witch. It was a warm night for November, too warm a night for witches, or so the story said. Witches were supposed to be extinct, of course, but Tsar had heard about the way they stank, and he imagined he could smell that now, in the quietness of the dark forest, a faint but definite stink of burning hair mixed with long dead mice and a little kick of viper's venom, once smelled, never forgotten. Tsar was a wild young human boy who belonged to the wizard tribe, who was riding on the back of a giant snowcat in a part of the forest so dark and mangled and tangled that it was known as the Bad Woods. He should not have been there, for the Bad Woods were warrior territory, and if the warriors were to catch him, well, what everyone said was Tsar would be killed on sight, off with his head, as was the pleasant warrior custom. But Tsar did not look even remotely worried. He was a cheerful scruff of a boy with a tremendous quiff of hair shooting upwards from his forehead, as if it had accidentally come into contact with some invisible vertical hurricane. The snowcat he was riding was called King Cat, a noble creature, which was a giant form of a lynx, far too dignified for his cheeky master. King Cat had shining paws so round they looked unreal, fur so deep it was like powder snow, and such a rich silvery grey colour that it was almost blue. The snowcat ran swiftly but softly through the forest, his black-tipped ears swivelling from side to side as he ran, for he was scared, although too proud to show it. Only that very morning, Tsar's father, Encanzo the Enchanter, king of wizards, had reminded everyone that it was forbidden for any wizard to dare set toe in the Bad Woods. But Tsar was the most disobedient boy in the wizard kingdom in about 4 generations, and forbidding things only encouraged him. In the past week, Tsar had tied the beards of 2 of the eldest and most respectful wizards together when they were sleeping at a banquet. He had poured a love potion into the pig's feeding trough, so the pigs developed passionate crushes on Tsar's least favourite teacher and followed him around wherever he went, making loud, enthusiastic squealing and kissing noises. He had accidentally burned down the western trees in the wizard camp too. Most of these things hadn't been entirely intentional, exactly. Tsar just got so carried away in the heat of the moment. And yet none of these disobedient things was half as bad as what Tsar was doing right now. There was a large black raven flying above Tsar's head. "This is a very bad idea indeed, Tsar," said the raven. The talking raven was called Caliburn, and he would have been a handsome bird, but unfortunately it was his job to keep Tsar out of trouble, and the worry of this impossible mission meant his feathers kept falling out. "It isn't really fair to lead your animals and sprites and young fellow wizards into danger." As the son of the king enchanter and a boy with a great deal of personal charisma, Tsar had a lot of followers. A pack of 5 wolves, 3 snowcats, a bear, 8 sprites, and an enormous giant called Crusher, and a small crowd of other young wizards, all following Tsar as if hypnotised, all shivering and scared, and pretending not to be. "Oh, you worry too much, Caliburn," said Tsar, pulling King Cat to a halt and jumping off his back. "Look at this lovely, pretty little glade here. You see? Perfectly safe, and exactly the same as the rest of the forest." Tsar looked around with breezy satisfaction, as if they'd stopped in a delightful woodland dell filled with frolicking bunnies and baby deer, rather than a cold, eerie little clearing where the yews leaned threateningly and the mistletoe dripped like warlocks' tears. The other wizards drew their swords, and the growling snowcats first stood up with fear to such an extent that they looked like furry puffballs. The wolves padded restlessly, trying to form a protective circle around their humans. Only the smaller sprites shared Tsar's enthusiasm, but that was because they were too young to know any better. I don't know if you've ever seen a sprite, so I'd better describe one to you. There's one there. There were 5 larger sprites, all faintly resembling a human crossed with a fierce, elegant insect. When irritated or bored, which was often, they blinked on and off like stars, and purple smoke drifted out of their ears. They were so see-through you could watch their hearts beating. Then there were 3 smaller ones, younger ones, who, because they were not adults yet, were known as hairy fairies. Tsar's favourite was an eager, slightly stupid little thing called Squeegees. "Oh, it's lovely," squeaked Squeegees. "It's a tremendously lovely clearing I've ever seen. What's this fascinating flower? Oh, let me guess, it's a buttercup, it's a crazy. It's a gangrelium. It's a cauliflower. He flew into the upper branches of a particularly gloomy and sinister tree and perched on the edge of one of its fleshly flowers, which had ominous spikes on it at the end of its leaves, and was in fact called a sprite-eating hobtrap. The flower snapped shut with the briskness of a mousetrap, capturing poor little Squeegees inside. Caliburn landed on Czar's shoulder and gave a heavy sigh. I don't like to say, I told you so, said Caliburn, but I've only seen this perfectly safe little clearing in the Badwoods for 1.5 minutes, and you've already lost one of your followers to a carnivorous flower. Nonsense, scolded Czar good-naturedly. I haven't lost him. That's the whole point about being a leader. Whenever my followers get into trouble, I rescue them, because that's what a leader does. Czar climbed the tree, and 200 feet up, swaying precariously on a couple of creaking tree-like boughs, he took out his dagger and popped open the sprite-eating hobtrap to release a panting little Squeegees in the nick of time. "I's fine," squeaked Squeegees. "I's fine. I can't feel my leg, but I's fine." "Don't worry, Squeegees. That's just the hobtrap's digestive juices. The feeling will return in a couple of hours," Czar called out as he dropped down from the tree. "You see, I'm a great leader. Stick with me and you'll be fine." The wizard's youngsters looked very thoughtful indeed. At that moment, Czar's older brother, Luter, came out of the shadows following them, sitting astride a great grey wolf, and followed by even more sprites and animals and young wizards than followed Czar himself. Czar stiffened because he hated his older brother, Luter. Luter was a lot bigger than Czar. He was nearly as tall as their father. He was brilliant at magic. He was good-looking and clever, and my goodness, didn't he know it. He was the smuggest smug wizard you could possibly imagine, and he often sneaked on Czar to get Czar into trouble. "What are you doing here, Luter?" stormed Czar suspiciously. "Oh, I just followed you to see what unbelievably stupid and pointless little thing my ickle brother was going to do this time," drawled Luter. Great leaders like me don't do pointless expeditions," fumed Czar. "We're here for a reason, and it's none of your business, but—" Czar considered telling Luter some elaborate lie about what he was doing, but he couldn't resist showing off. "We're going to catch ourselves a witch," boasted Czar proudly. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. This was the first time that Czar had mentioned this to his followers, the purpose of their expedition, and it was very unwelcome news indeed. A witch! The bear, the snowcats, and the wolves went very still and began to shake. Even Ariel, the wildest and most unafraid of Czar's sprites, shot up into the air and momentarily disappeared. "There are witches in this part of Badwoods. I know it," whispered Czar excitedly, as if a witch were a delightful sort of present he was offering to everyone. There was a long silence, and then Luter and his wizard followers began to laugh. They laughed and they laughed and they laughed. "Oh, come on, Czar," Luter said at last, once he got his breath back. "Even you must know that witches have been extinct for centuries." "Ah, yes," said Czar. "But what if some of them survived and they've been hiding here all this time? Look! Here's what I found in the clearing only yesterday." And out of his rucksack he carefully took an absolutely gigantic black feather. It was huge, like the feather of a crow, but much, much larger. A soft black fading at the end to a glowing dark shiny green, and the colour of a mallard's head. "It's a witch's feather," whispered Czar. Luter smiled, a most superior smile. "That's just the feather of some gigantic old bird," scoffed Luter. "Some giant crow. You get some weird things living in Badwoods." Czar frowned and hung the feather from his belt. "I've never seen a bird as big as this one," said Czar grumpily. "It's all nonsense," said Luter. "Only a brainless fool like you wouldn't know that. Witches were destroyed forever." Caliburn flapped downward and landed on Czar's head. "Forever is a long word," said the raven. "You see," said Czar triumphantly, "Caliburn is a bird of omen who can see the future and into the past, and he doesn't think that witches are gone forever. All I know, if witches were not to be extinct for some reason, you wouldn't want to go meeting one in this dark place," said Caliburn, shivering. "What do you want a witch for, Czar?" "I'm going to catch the witch," said Czar, "and remove its magic and use it for myself." There was another horrified silence. Eventually Luter spoke. "That, little brother, is the worst plan I have ever heard in the whole history of plan-making." "You're just jealous that you didn't think of it," said Czar. "I have a few questions," said Luter. "How are you going to catch the witch in the first place?" "That's for the nets that I took," said Czar, taking a net out of his rucksack and holding it up. You couldn't fault his enthusiasm, at least. "One of us will volunteer to be wounded ever so slightly, and then the blood will attract the witch." Oh, great, smiled Luther. Now you're going to wound one of your sad little followers in a forest stuffed with raving werewolves and blood-sniffing ogre breaths. Come on, are you completely crazy? This plan is as pathetic as you are. Zara ignored him. And then I'll entangle the witch in its net when it attacks. Next question. Okay, question 2, said Luther. No living wizard has ever seen a witch, so how do you know what one looks like? Zara opened his rucksack, took out the book, as large as an atlas, entitled The Spelling Book. Every wizard is equipped with a spelling book, given to them at birth. Zara was looking extremely worse for wear. One part of it was invisible. It accidentally got dropped into an invisibility potion. Another bit was burned so black he could barely read it. This happened when Zara set fire to the wizard camp. And many of the pages were loose and dropping all over the place. Too many adventures to go in here. Zara opened the book to the contents page, which had 26 letters of the alphabet written on it in very large gold script. Zara spelled out witches by tapping on each letter in turn, and the book turned its own pages, which seemed to go on forever and ever and ever. The chapters in front turning invisible as the book rifled through the rest of them like an endless pack of cards, until eventually they stopped in the right place. That's weird. It doesn't say what they look like, but they're green, I think, said Zara. Someone else thought witches could turn invisible, so they had acid blood, and another one after that squirted that blood through their eyes. I'm sure we'll recognise one when we see it, said Zara, impatiently shutting the spell book. They're supposed to be pretty horrible, aren't they? Awesomely horrible, said Caliburn gravely. The most terrifying creatures that ever walked the earth. So even if you do catch this witch, how will you persuade it to part with its magic?